Hello, everyone, and welcome to Smart Sex, Smart Love. We're talking about sex goes beyond the taboo, and talking about love goes beyond the honeymoon. My guest today is Searah Deysach, a sex educator and owner of Early to Bed and Trans Essentials. Searah started Early to Bed more than 20 years ago when she could not find a safe, friendly, shame-free, and personalized woman-oriented shop for sex toys. She decided to open a place where she would shop. Today, business is thriving in her brick and mortar store and on her website. It's her mission to spread the good word about positive and healthy sexuality to as many people as she can through her shop, website, blog, and educational outreach endeavors. In addition to running her retail store and websites, Searah lectures to community groups and colleges on topics relating to masturbation, sex toys, and positive sexuality. She's committed to working to create a culture where everyone has access to honest information about sexuality and the services they need to protect their reproductive rights. Searah is a proud member of Chicago's LGBTQ plus community and has been featured in numerous outlets, including New York Magazine, Cosmopolitan, Washington Post, Women's Health, Shape, Playgirl, Glamour, and many more. Today, she's going to talk to us about sexual confidence and self-esteem. Welcome, Searah.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, very, very great resume here and doing lots of stuff. And I love when someone says, because I did it myself, you don't see it out there, so you create it and make it happen.
Find a need and fill it. That's my mantra.
I love that. I love it. All right, so let's get right down to the first question, which is that you recently conducted a survey to see if the pandemic directly impacted sexual confidence and self-esteem in adults in the United States. And you found some super interesting results. Will you share them?
Yes, I will, actually. It was very interesting and surprising. Well, we saw a 30% increase in sexual empowerment as a result of a newfound confidence in verbal self-expression, which I thought was really interesting. People also reported a surge in body confidence, which was, again, sort of surprising. And 50% of the people that we surveyed said that they had a higher sexual self-esteem today than they did before the pandemic. So, particularly lockdown too. So I think that was all really interesting statistics from the survey that we did.
Why do you think that is, that the pandemic, you think it's a result of the pandemic, right?
I do. I don't think it's just a coincidence. I think that a lot happened really quickly and really abruptly. And all of a sudden we were, one, spending more time alone, two, or with our partners, if we have partners we lived with. But at the same time, all of a sudden, we had to think about our boundaries. We had to start talking about our relationships more. And I think that we had to just verbalize more about our lives and think more carefully about our relationships, what we wanted of them, and what risks we were worth taking. So I think that's kind of, especially with lockdown, I think that's like the base of where all of this kind of comes from.
I love that. And why do you think it increased sexual self-esteem? What do you think that was about?
I mean, it's hard to know. But I think that, well, first of all, we saw just a huge surge of people buying sex toys as soon as lockdown started. And I think that while a lot of that was fun and play, I think for a lot of people that was a time of self-exploration. And I think when you spend more time exploring your body, trying new things, accessing new avenues of pleasure, whether it's with yourself or with your partner who you're stuck at home with, I think that can't help but build your sexual confidence because you're doing something new, you're learning about new pleasure avenues, and that gives you more of an ability to be like, oh, right, yeah, I like this variety of things, or I like these new things, or it puts you in a position where you're like, oh, wait, we tried that and that's not really my jam. So I'm going to feel confident because we're talking about things now more. I'm going to tell you I'm not really into that. And that kind of helps, I think, to build up your sexual confidence too, when you have more communication in general.
I like that. That makes sense. I always say that in gay male relationships and even in lesbian relationships, they're much more verbal and much more sharing back and forth and talking about what they want, what they don't like, what they like. So I would imagine that for straight couples, especially with COVID, you're like, well, are you okay with this still? And what do you want to do? And maybe that's where that came from. And now it was like, this might have been a place to say, hey, there are things I've always wanted. Maybe we could try to do these.
Oh, I totally agree. And I mean, I don't know like who was buying what from early to bed, but we saw particularly a surge in like anal toys and kink toys. And so my interpretation of that is people are staying home and they're trying new things because those are things that for, as popular as they are, they're a little bit more on the, outer rim of whatever we would think of as, traditional sex activities or something like that. But I think that people were pushing their boundaries a little bit, probably partially out of boredom and probably partially out of, wow, we have, all this extra time. Let's do this thing that takes a little more prep or that takes a little more discussion. So, I think it was trying new things was really part of it too.
Do you think these changes are long lasting?
I hope so. I mean, I hope that when we build up our self-confidence and when we get used to expressing ourselves verbally, we don't go backwards. And I hope that, I believe, especially this, because this is, my identity, but like cis women, like I think that they talk more about sex when they're more confident. And so I'm hoping that there's some sort of like, I don't know if it's a ripple effect or trickle down effect or whatever kind of, wave pattern it is, but that more sexually confident people talk to other people about sex and more sex than that sort of like, increases the number of people who are feeling more confident or who are asking questions or saying, wow, it's amazing to see you talking like this. How did you tap into that? Or what did you do? So I'm hoping that it's just a upward path.
And let me ask you this, since you mentioned that you're a cis woman, what do you think in general, and I know that's just your own thoughts or observations or speculations, how do cis women feel when they find out that their straight male partners have sex toys, particularly anal sex toys?
Oh, wow. That's a divergent question.
Yeah, sorry. It just came to my mind. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm happy to talk about anything. I think it totally varies. I mean, I think when, all of my experiences through the lens of running in a sex toy store and seeing people who are coming in and looking for sex toys, right? So I don't have the best view of people who are like, whoa, butt sex is really weird. But we're seeing more and more people who, are just comfortable with sex toys. They're available in more places. And I think that there's more and more, if we're talking about cisgendered heterosexual couples, I think there's way more acceptance of things like butt sex, especially, there's this long history of men wanting it from women. And I think there's a lot of women now who are like, well, if you want it, maybe, we should try you first so you know how it feels. Or just also, I think, this is my whole other thing, like divergent thing I often go on. But I think there's also been a huge shift with butt sex and straight men when we start to talk about prostate stimulation. I think before we were talking about prostate stimulation, it seemed just like more gay. And I'm using that in quotes because I don't believe that's true, but that's how people were seeing it. But now that prostate stimulation is like a healthy thing, people talk about it. It seems way more approachable for cisgender heterosexual couples to then sort of frame it as that, which I think allows people to feel more comfortable with it for, whether that's good or bad. I mean, it's good because more butt sex is better for everyone who wants it. But I think there's always going to be people who are confused by somebody's tastes or whose partner's tastes aren't going to align with theirs, of course. But I think we're seeing a lot more open-mindedness in general, especially when it comes to things like butt sex and kink and stuff like that.
Yeah, I have a tagline. I always say that your anus doesn't have a sexual orientation. It doesn't know whether it's gay, straight, or bi. And so I'm a gay man, and I've never had butt sex. I don't want it. I don't want to give it. I don't want to get it. And I coined the term several years ago called side. Have you ever heard of that?
No, say it one more time.
So it's side. So how gay men are tops. They give anal sex.
Oh.
They're bottoms, they're receiving, there's versatile. Well, I'm none of that. So I said, if you can be a top or a bottom, can you be a side? And I created a group. I have a Facebook group of 7,500 guys. But the reason I say this to you, too, is I have learned For me, being a side means no butt stuff. Don't even get near there. And for some sides, they like sex toys and they like butt play. They don't want intercourse, but they like the sensation of doing it to themselves or even a partner using it, but not a real penis. They'd rather have a sex toy. Have you ever heard of that?
Oh, of course. And you think about, yes, for sure. And I think, culturally, there's this idea that like butt sex means someone's penis goes in someone's anus, right? And like that's very traditional in many different ways. But I think that, like any part of your body, there's just a huge range of exploring the sensations, right? So it could mean stimulation only externally. It could mean only fingers. It could mean butt toys. And if you think about a finger or a butt toy, the size differential is in many cases, substantial. And I think that we do a lot of education, like, just because you want to enjoy butt sex doesn't mean you want something the size of a cisgendered male penis in your butt. And just because you like something small doesn't mean, just because you like something small doesn't mean you don't enjoy butt sex. It means you just like it to this, there's limits. It's the same, with vaginal penetration or even external stimulation. Like, it's not a one size fits all approach, but I absolutely think that's the case for lots of people. For some people, sex toys especially butt toys, are a stepping stone to being prepared for something bigger. And for lots of people, that, mini butt plug is great. And that's where they're going to stay and, enjoy it and then not really move on. So yeah, there's a whole range. And I think that, of course, all of it is being valid and awesome.
What I love is that you want to have these kind of and help people have these open, honest sexual conversations like you're so comfortable and I'm so comfortable. What are some tips that you have for people to improve their verbal expression skills when it comes to their sexual needs and desires?
Well, I think practice, of course, is the most important. I think that we are not taught to talk about sex. We are taught that, like, you shouldn't have to talk about it to just magically happen at this, R-rated movie kind of way. Like, that I always think is almost worse than, I don't think porn's bad, but like worse at showing how sexually is than porn sometimes is R-rated movies. Anyways. But I think practicing and starting kind of small, right? So if you want to start talking more about sex or having more of a verbal communication with your partner, but you don't want to start with, okay, here's all these things we need to talk about, blah, 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 blah. I think being more specific, like if you're having sex and you're like, oh, that was great. Maybe try something like, oh, that was great. I really loved it when you did X, Y, and Z to my, whatnot, adding something so that you're getting some more specificity in there that I think then if you're like, oh, I really love it when you do this to my this, then you might feel more comfortable later saying like, and actually when you do this, I don't like that, but maybe you could try this. And I think what we don't realize and what I love to talk about is most people who are worth having sex with, the time and the energy and the safety and all those things, should want to have that communication with you, should be welcoming your feedback and stuff like that. So I think if we can internalize that more, and that it's not a bad thing to talk about sex, I think that helps a lot too. Just being more verbal. If being quiet because the kids are in the bedroom next door is an issue, but like if you can make noises during sex, again, instead of just like, oh, Jesus, or whatever you say, like, yes, right there. Oh, a little bit lower. Oh, let's try this instead or something like that. Just like getting used to verbalizing what's happening in the moment too, I think can help you feel more comfortable talking about it later. And I think overall leads to better sex because you're communicating with your partner what's feeling good as opposed to just being like, oh, this is over soon or something like that, which I think a lot of people sometimes do. Or I wish it was a little bit more to the left, but I don't want to tell them because they'll be insulted. But, hopefully people will welcome that feedback.
I know. And I usually suggest to people that maybe you don't give the feedback when it's happening, give it later at a time when you're not being sexual, right?
Oh, sure. Like, the snuggling, maybe even snuggling afterwards or a completely different time, like, hey, remember last week when we did this? I either really liked that or I didn't like that, but I had this other idea. I think like we are all sensitive creatures and I think we are very vulnerable when we're having sex and feedback can be hard to take in the moment. And, someone could hear a little to the left and think, you're doing everything wrong. And so, and shame is a lot of tied into this. I think, you know your partner better when you need to be gentle and when you don't, but I think you can always talk about sex outside the bedroom, or get like there's so many like, card sets and dice sets and ways that you can facilitate conversations with your partner that seem goofy, but can be really helpful because that card is telling you what to say or giving you a prompt, or that goofy game you're playing is helping you to try something new and then talk about it. So I think there's a lot of ways to facilitate these conversations, but I also think just like tapping into being honest and just practicing is the best way to start.
Now, what if if verbal is too much? There's some people that like, I just can't do it verbally. And maybe they're even on the autism spectrum and verbal is just too much, too direct. What other ways could people communicate to each other?
Well, I think when you're having sex, there's a lot of nonverbal ways to communicate, moving someone's face or hand or whatever it is a little bit to the right or the left, or if you need to, like removing them from part of your body or adding them to part of your body, all of this under the guise of everyone's consented to being together and doing what you're doing. I also think after the fact, I'm a big fan of like little notes, like a little what would be a love note, but like, boy, I really liked it when you did this, or would you want to try this, and putting in a little card and, leaving it somewhere or handing it to them. Things like yes, no, maybe lists. If you've ever, talked about those, like actually sitting down and writing lists of what you are into, what you're not into, and what you might want to try can be really helpful too. It's a little more work and a little more intense, but there's a lot of sort of nonverbal ways that you can tell someone what you're feeling or how you want to go about things.
Yeah, sometimes I'll even tell my couples maybe get online and read some erotica, or look up. There's a lot of websites that just have, and I think they're called literotica or whatever, or just watching porn together if they want to, or some erotic movies, and then being able to say, "Hey, I like that," or "What'd you think of that?" or "What turned you on about that story?" That kind of a thing too.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think there's also a lot of like how-to books, if one of you is reading them then and you find a chapter that really speaks to what you want to do or what you want to communicate, you can like, put a bookmark in there, leave that book out for them and ask them to read it. Like you can ask someone, hey, will you read that chapter? And then we can talk about it or not talk about it, but you read it too. I think there's a lot of ways, you can share media together in a way that feels safe.
And can you talk about helping partners feel more comfortable in bed? How can people help their partner feel more comfortable?
I mean, it's hard. I will say it's hard to, change the way someone feels about themselves. But I do believe that, being a cheerleader is a great way to start, giving them that confidence, giving them positive feedback, telling them they're gorgeous, telling them how sexy they look when they're on top of you or underneath you or having an orgasm. I think that, we often tell our lovers or our partners how great they look when they're dressed up to go out or, something like that. But I think we should remember that positive feedback, it's really helpful, especially when someone's really vulnerable and naked and maybe feeling awkward about their bodies. Maybe you don't need to say like, I really love the shape of your belly. That might draw attention somewhere that someone's feeling uncomfortable, but your partner better. And maybe that would be really great for someone to hear because that's the part of their body they're feeling really weird about. And I think that, you have to kind of figure out what your partner needs to hear. But I think that's a great way to, help someone feel more comfortable. And I think, again, just like, giving positive feedback. I really liked that. That was really awesome. It's a journey for lots of people, but it can be really easy. No, and we can't solve it overnight, or when someone's self-esteem isn't going to change because you told them 4 times that they have a hot ass, but it can work to help build up people's self-esteem if you give them positive reinforcement.
Yep, and really push yourselves. Like I remember, I've always been kind of kinky myself, and I have my own fetishes. And I remember a therapist and I had a lot of shame about it in my early years. And I remember him pushing me really to tell my husband, and I didn't want to, because some of it was I didn't really want to do it with him. I liked it in my own head. Mm-hmm. I had my own fantasies around it, but it was probably the best thing I ever did. Just getting rid of the shame, and now I would tell anybody. It doesn't bother
Clearly.
me. But, right, it doesn't. Yeah. Have you ever had to help people be able to talk about that and give them some confidence?
Oh, yes, for sure. I mean, I like to, I guess, state the fact that, I went to art school, I own a retail store, I'm not a therapist, but we do get people in the store all the time who they've never talked to anybody about their sex life before. They've never talked to their partner, their doctor, their therapist, whatever it is. And sometimes when you ask someone a simple question, whoa, next thing you know, you're hearing all of these stories that they have never told anybody before. And so we do a lot of talking to people about, a lot of it is normalizing things, sort of back to the kinky thing. Like, I think a lot of people think that they're holding something that is super weird. No one's ever done this before, felt this before, liked this before. And, I think 99% of the time, it's something that you're not alone in thinking or feeling. And so a lot of what we do is normalize stuff for people, like, oh my God, that's not the first time we've heard that question. Here's, what we recommend to people or stuff like that. And it's really rewarding because it's like people have nowhere else to turn for that information. There's the internet, and the internet's great, but it's not necessarily easy to search sex stuff without finding things you don't want to find. You don't know who to trust. And I think that having a place where people can come in and trust that the people who are there are going to take them seriously. I think that's a lot of what's been really great about having the store. But I think we do spend a lot of time helping people feel better about how they feel. And also walking into a store, a lot of people have never been to a sex toy store before, and you walk in and you see these devices that you've had an interest in that you thought was maybe a little bit like out there, and then you're like, oh, there's a whole wall of them? Great. This is obviously not that weird. So I think that can be really helpful too to people.
Yes. Could you talk a little bit, because I think people that are listening are going to want to know, because your work is early to bed and trans essentials. What is trans essentials?
So trans essentials is it's a separate website that we have. It's a lot of the same stuff we carry in the store, but none of it's sex, like for sexual stimulation. It's all gender expression gear, so things to help people just feel more embodied in their bodies, and for the most part trans and non-binary bodies. So things like chest binders that compress someone's chest, or packers which help give somebody a bulge if they're transmasculine, underwear for tucking, stuff like that. So basically clothing and accessories for people who are trans and non-binary. And I started as a separate website because it's sort of different. It's different than a dildo. It's different than a butt toy. It's a whole different thing. And I wanted to create a space where, people could look at it with their parents or their social worker or something like that, and not have to be like, oh, there's butt plugs over here. Like, it's all just gender expression gear, which is like an all ages kind of thing. So it's sort of a way to separate that stuff out. Even though when you go to our store or to Early to Bed, our website, all that stuff is there too. It just is a separate little thing.
I like that you're making the distinction, right? One is for sexual pleasure and one is for gender, taking away gender dysphoria and helping people find stuff. Yes.
Comes. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, it's just all weird that it all comes from the same industry, right? So like the people who are making penises for sex were the people who started making penises for, just, so that's why it's like, it's weird sometimes that's in a sex toy store, but it's because it's like the industry and the suppliers are all kind of the same. Anyways.
That makes sense. No, I will show, when I do my LGBT presentations to therapists, I show them the bulges, the flaccid dildos, I think I'm saying that right, flaccid phalluses, I should say, or stand to pee. Yeah. And when I first did all this, I was like, well, first of all, I would never want to be embarrass the trans community. And then I thought, is this sexual? It took me a few times of presenting, of going, no, this is, therapists want to know. They hear about it from their clients, but they don't know what these things look like. I didn't know what they look like. So it helps people. And I pass it around so people can get an idea of what actually is happening for a lot of the trans people.
Yeah, and I love that you do that. We work with therapists, and we work with the veterans hospitals and provide prosthetics, and so it's interesting. These products are becoming more and more commonplace and used by a wider range of folks. And yeah, I feel really proud that we're able to serve that community and that we have from the beginning, kind of because that's my queer community where I came from. So
I love it. What would you say that we haven't talked about yet that you wanted to make sure when we're on this podcast that that's something important you wanted listeners to hear?
Well, I mean, the one thing that I like to talk about a lot is that I think we forget a lot that sex is a journey and that it's going to change so much in our life. You know, we talk to a lot of people who are going through a dry spell or having a thing that's causing them concern right now, or, you know, a disconnect with their partner or something like that. And I think that we think sometimes that this is where we are and this is where I'll always be. So I like to really remind people that, like, wherever you are on your sexual journey is where you are right now. And there's a lot of ways you can go. And there's a lot of things that are going to change in your life. And just kind of be there for the ride and work. You know, sometimes it takes work to have the sex life that you want. And I think, again, we don't talk enough about that being something we have to sometimes be really intentional about, whether we have partners or not. You know, like, sex doesn't just magically happen for most people all the time. And that it's okay to talk about it. We should talk about it. And we should realize that we all deserve a good, healthy sex life. And sometimes that means we have to put a little bit more effort into it, whether that's, you know, more communication or more masturbation, whatever it is that can help you have a more rich and satisfying sex life.
That's why I love actually your business being called Early to Bed, because it's not going to bed, it's going early to bed to make time for this. People don't understand you have to make time. It doesn't just happen. Is that how you came up with it, or how did you come up with the name?
You know, actually, a friend came up with the name. We were sitting around trying to think of something that was evocative but not like too floral or too crass, you know, and somebody was just like, Early to Bed. And it just was like perfect because, yeah, we have the devices to encourage you to go to bed early.
I love it.
Spend more time in bed or wherever it is. Thank you. Yeah, I like it.
If people want to be able to find you, how can they do that on the internet? Where can they go?
So our website is earlytobed.com, and it's the number 2, so early2bed.com. Also Trans Essentials, which is transessentials.com. And then we have a super cute Instagram that is earlytobed.shop, because our original Instagram was deactivated in the spring. So we're building up our followers, so come check us out on Instagram. But yes, the website's the best way to find us.
Yeah, that could be a whole podcast about how we're all getting censored on the internet, and a lot of my colleagues, including you, it sounds like, are getting deactivated for some of your posts. And I'm being super careful with my posts because I don't want to be deactivated.
Oh, I know. And I have somebody who's a professional who does it, and she knows everything that we're supposed to do and not do, but you get enough people complaining or whatever it is, like, we don't know what it was. They don't tell you what it was. They don't give you, and it was just 15,000 followers just gone in an instant. So
right.
We're constantly trying to figure out other ways to make sure we stay in contact with our community, because we love our community.
And I know. You want psychoeducation, sexual education. Yeah,
exactly. It sucks.
All right. Well, Searah, it was a pleasure having you as a guest on my show. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. And if you want to hear more of my podcasts, you just go to smartsexsmartlove.com. But you can also follow me on Twitter, TikTok. By the way, I just got almost 680,000 followers on TikTok. I'm really excited. Instagram and Facebook, it's Dr. Joe Kort, DrJoeKort, or you can just go to joekort.com and find it all there. So thanks for listening, and be safe and healthy, and I'll see you next time.